everybody, welcome back into cherry picking today's video, the first fantasy hockey mailbag of this season. As always, the video presented by FanDuel Canada. The link is in the description below to download that app. Get betting on the NHL this season. Tons of different ways to bet on the NHL on FanDuel. Definitely offer the most variety of markets, I would have to say. The fantasy mailbag, finally back from last season. Pick some questions from other videos that I've done, especially the buy low, sell high. There's definitely a ton of questions there, a lot to talk about from that video. And then I'll continue to post community posts to see if you guys have any other questions that I'll try to answer. Probably try to do these maybe once every 2 weeks. We'll kind of see how the flow of things go, but let's get into this week's fantasy hockey mailbag. All right, so the first question we have here, I have Huberdeau on my team. We've definitely talked about him a lot on this channel. Produced quite a bit at the beginning of the season, but has tailed off lately. Should I keep, trade, or drop him? So this depends on a couple situations for sure. Is there that much upside in keeping Jonathan Huberdeau right now? I don't think so, unless you're in like a really deep league. I would like to say that the line that he plays on with Martin Pospisil and Anthony Mantha at this point is probably like their third line, because you have the Kadri-Kuzmenko line with Zary, or sorry, the Kadri-Kuzmenko line that's working really well, and then you have the Backlund-Coleman, Zary line that's also working well. So I would say this is probably the third, and it's like more evident than that, because 5-on-5 ice time amongst forwards, Jonathan Huberdeau 7th on the Calgary Flames so far to start the year. However, he is second in power play time, only behind Kuzmenko. He does have 3 power play points, but I don't think he's necessarily been like the driver of offense on this power play. I think that probably goes to the role of Kadri or Kuzmenko. I've talked about how much I like this line, more the narrative of it, like 3 gigantic human beings playing on the same line, like definitely more daunting. You don't think of them as like a scoring line. However, Huberdeau is 40% owned. Flames have 4 games this week and I think 3 the following week. I think that's when you add him. When the Flames have 4 games in a week, that's when you want to stream him, especially if you're trying to look at those matchups. More often than not, playing in that division, they'll have some pretty easy matchups, I would say, at least once a week, unless it's like the gauntlet part of their schedule. If you're in a 14 to 16 man league, I'd keep him. I don't think I'd necessarily go and trade for him, but I wouldn't necessarily drop him if you're in that deep of a league. Anything smaller than that, yeah, I think there's probably better options on the waiver wire. All right, so the next question we have here, what should I do with my goalies? Currently have Kochetkov, Stolars, and a healthy Wall on IR. Need to drop one. So this question's probably a little bit old, but I thought it'd be a good time to talk about the goalie situation in Toronto. And it kind of gives me an opportunity to also say, like, it's easy to keep Kochetkov at this point. I think regardless of what happened with Freddie Anderson, you'd keep him. But Freddie Anderson, again, dealing with injury concerns, injury issues after starting the season on absolute fire. Freddie Anderson, I believe, leads the NHL in goals against average. So when he's healthy, he could be one of the best goalies in the NHL, but it's hasn't been the fact of the matter for him. That's why Kochetkov has really gotten a chance on this Hurricanes team. Similar situation is happening in Toronto now. Joseph Woll just can't stay healthy. He finally comes back. He has a very poor start in his first start back. I believe he gave up 4 or 5 goals. It's hard at this point to say, like, yeah, let's give the net to Woll, because Stolars for the past year now, including Florida, has been one of the best goalies in the NHL. And I know he's played less games, but he has 30 plus starts. His goals against last year was almost below 2. It was about 2.05 or 2.03 or something like that. His save percentage was 925, and I was always a big believer being like, oh, that's just because, he plays on Florida. The Florida Panthers play very well defensively. It's going to be completely different when Toronto, but I mean, already 4-2-1 this year, has a 2.45 goals against and a 9.10 save percentage. Those are very solid stats. Wall hasn't touched those numbers in the NHL, really, I would say, at any point of his career, and he's still obviously younger than Stolars, but all that being said, you keep Kochetkov, and you definitely keep Stolars. You can have that option of keeping Wall if you want to have a third goalie, to always have someone playing for the Leafs, because the Leafs are going to win a lot of games this year. But if you really want to drop someone, there's someone better on your waiver wire, Wall is the guy you're going to drop. All right, here's a question we got on the buy low, sell high. Should I trade Gunther or Tippett for Zach Hyman? The guy goes on to explain his league format: 12-team head-to-head, goals against, points, power play points, shots on goals, hits, blocks, penalty minutes. Gunther, and Tippett are good, but you can't forget, like, Hyman was 15th in most fantasy points scored just a season ago. I know Connor McDavid just went down, and it seems, at first Ryan Rishaug said it's not that serious, but then someone said he's not, traveling with the team, he's going back to Edmonton, and now I'm hearing it's week to week at this point. Maybe the Oilers need to show a little bit of resiliency without McDavid in their lineup. It's hard to say you can trust Hyman without McDavid in the lineup, but I'd imagine he'll play with Draisaitl or maybe Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in the center. That part is a little hard to determine, but the point of it being McDavid won't be out for the entire season. I also say Gunther's pretty hot right now, obviously, to start the year. 6 goals, I believe, in his first 7 or 8 games, 9 games now. The lines are still being switched a little bit by Andre Turingi to see kind of what works the best, but he was most recently on a line with Keller and Cooley. That was like the first line, and he did score against San Jose, even though they did lose that game. Can't imagine that line stays together for all that long. Like defensively, there's no way that's a good matchup against any first line or any top 6 line, I would say, if you're playing any competitive hockey team at that point. So I can't imagine that line stays together. And if that line stays together, his production will drop off. I think his ceiling this year for Gunther is 30 goals, while Zach Hyman had 54 last year and almost 300 shots on goal. Gunther's not going to get that volume of, or he's not going to get that goal production, and he's certainly not going to get the volume of shots playing on a Utah team where there's a bunch of guys shooting, including if you're playing on a line with Clayton Keller as well. There's no way you amass that amount of that shot total. And then Tippett was kind of like the shiny new toy in Philly, I want to say, for the last 2 years. Everyone was like very in awe about his speed, his shot as well. Obviously on that power play last year was pretty solid. But now you have Matvei Michkov and some of the other younger guys are starting to play a little bit better as well. And Michkov to start the, like, he's like top 3 in power play points to start the year as well. He's been an absolute force on the power play for the Flyers. Like one of the main reasons why they're a top 7 unit at this point, power play and penalty kill. So I can't imagine Tippett really has like a room for a huge role or a role where he can have the same kind of production as Zach Hyman. So no, if I'm trading Zach Hyman, I wouldn't want to give up Zach Hyman for Gunther or Tippett. I would try to give up Gunther or Tippett for Hyman for sure, you know, a good buy low spot, because as I mentioned, McDavid will be out for a couple weeks and maybe that hurts Hyman's production in the short term, but this could be a guy that could win your league in the playoffs later in the year after you give up. At this point, it seems like people could get him for beans at this point. So I would definitely try to do these trades and definitely still try to trade for Zach Hyman. All right, so the next question we got here, would you trade Roman Josi for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Mackenzie Weegar? I know Josi, tough start to the year. Predators, tough start to the year. Josi just 5 assists, no goals. He's also a -7, which is very tough, very surprising to see to a defenseman's level of caliber of Roman Josi to see that he's -7. He does have 41 shots on goal. He's creating a ton of offense. He's second in individual expected goals for amongst defensemen, only behind Cale Makar, who has 17 points and 3 goals. Meanwhile, you have a guy like Roman Josi who's 5 points. Like those tend to balance out a little bit more for sure in terms of, or in Roman Josi's favor, 100%. His shooting talent is certainly above average for defensemen. I think that's pretty clear to say over the past couple years. You know, stat website that tracks that, Money Puck, I think he's in the top 15% in shooting talent above average amongst defensemen. He's also, his goals for percentage right now is below 40%. He's never finished a season with a goals for percentage below 50%. So he's going to be on for a lot more goals. Therefore, he's going to be getting a lot more points, getting a lot more assists, scoring a lot more goals for sure. So I'd hang on to him. He will start to score. Is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Mackenzie Weegar moving the needle for me to give up a guy like Roman Josi that was being taken in the first 15 picks of fantasy hockey drafts this season? I wouldn't say so. Weegar's off to a hot start with 3 goals, trying to match that total of 20 last year where he got, which I don't think that's going to really work. But 5 straight years you've had Roman Josi finish in the top 3 amongst fantasy hockey defensemen in points scored. 3 out of the 5 years I think he led all defensemen in fantasy points scored. So really tough to give him up at this point, especially for a duo like that. Keep Roman Josi. Don't lose faith in him yet. He'll be top 5 by the end of the year. I can almost guarantee. All right, the other question we got here. Gabriel Valard is my weakest player right now, and the second I drop him, he's probably going to go off. Usually that's how it happens. Is it fair that if he doesn't go off this week, I may drop him? This question I think is also a little old, and my suggestion would be at this point to keep him. Like, he's had 2 goals, 3 points in his last 3 games. He's playing on the first line with Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele. Kyle Connor coming off a hat trick against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Seems like he's poised for a pretty big year. He just has to stay healthy. Obviously, he had a similar start to the year, I want to say last year or year prior to that, but I think Gabriel Valard being on this line will certainly help his fantasy value. Like I mentioned, 2 goals, 3 points the last 3 games now. He's 22% rostered in Yahoo Fantasy Hockey Leagues. He's 5th in individual expected goals for on the Jets, 3rd in high danger chances for, or high danger chances created, and then 4th highest on ice expected goals for percentage. So when he's on the ice, he's creating offense, and when he's on the ice, the people around him are creating offense. They're good at offense when Gabriel Valard is on the ice, especially when you're playing alongside Connor and Scheifele, and then you're usually going to get Morrissey out there more often than not, considering you're on the top pair. So his numbers are good, definitely to put him in a good position to succeed at this point. I think he'll score a lot of goals. I think one of the biggest things that jumped out to me as I was talking about Roman Josi, his shooting talent above average is very high. The highest on the team, almost 22%, which that's in the same range as like Nikita Kucherov, like a couple points lower than a guy like Kirill Kaprizov, right around the same as Pavel Buchnevich and Brad Marchand. 22 goals in 47 games last year, 23 goals in 63 games the year prior to that in LA. So he will be able to score goals. He just needs to find the opportunity. A little bit of a slow start shouldn't really like push you off of that. And the fact that he's still 22% rostered, playing on the first line and first power play, I think he's definitely a guy you need to or own at this point. And if he's available in your league, I'd try to go get him. All right, so the last point we have here, and I kind of added it because it happened today. So Brian Rust listed as week to week, a guy that I told a lot of people to pick up because he's playing on that first line with Crosby again. He's always played really well in that role. Or a guy, sorry, not to pick up, but to buy low on because of his injury to start the year, and he didn't have a fantastic start. But he did score in his most recent game, and now he's hurt. So what happens to Pittsburgh's lines? Who's fantasy relevant? So the new first line, from what it seems like, recording this video before the Wild game that they play of Marc-Andre Fleury's last final game in Pittsburgh. New first line is Malkin, Crosby, and Rickard Rakell. Same as on the power play. Those are the three forwards they have. So you'll see a lot of points go for all three of these guys, I think, which is obviously a huge beneficiary to that is going to be Rickard Rakell. We haven't seen Crosby and Malkin, I feel like, playing on the line for a long time, like for a long extended period of time. Sure, they play together when they're on the ice, but like a long extended period of time of actually being listed on the depth chart together. So we'll see how long that actually lasts. Rakell is only owned in 15% of Yahoo Fantasy Hockey leagues at this point, so you could definitely add him. And at this point, he's probably going to continue to be added considering the Brian Rust news. But if the lines do switch up, there's guys that if you're in a really deep league that you want to jump on early to see if you can get some sort of value out of that or get them before anyone else in your league kind of finds out about it. Anthony Beauvillier started on the first line with Crosby at the beginning of the year, scored like 3 goals in the first 3 games. It was almost a point per game the first 5, I want to say, but now plays on the second line. Definitely doesn't have as much value if he's not playing with Sidney Crosby. And then there's Drew O'Connor as well. I think Beauvillier would probably be the ad for fantasy hockey I'd rather have. Very surprising we haven't seen Beauvillier being put on either power play. I heard because it was during the preseason, he really didn't show enough on the power play to have a solidified role, but he scored the first couple goals for this team, I want to say, when they played Detroit. And their first week, I want to say he was one of their top producers. So just a little bit surprising to me, but if you're looking for a temporary replacement for Brian Rust, it's definitely Rakell, but keep your eye on, daily faceoffs to see how those lines change, to see if you need to pick up anybody else like Anthony Beauvillier or Drew O'Connor. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of the first fantasy hockey mailbag of the season. Shout out to FanDuel Canada for sponsoring the video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.